In this presentation, I'll be going into 3 topics that are relevant to Module 1. The first topic to be discussed will be social class and inequality, then cultural difference and identity, and in turn, gender. When it comes to social class and inequality, the theorist that comes to mind is Max Weber. A German-born theorist, Weber was known for his profound impact in the area of sociology. Weber founded the theory that there are actually 4 social classes and not 2. They were broken up into upper class, upper middle class, lower middle class, and working class. Weber's findings are the most widely accepted in today's society. One of Weber's colleagues, Karl Marx, believed that there were only 2 social classes and not 4. The classes were divided up into 2 halves. One was classed as the capital class and the other was classed the working class. Capital class referred to those in society who owned capital and controlled systems that accumulated capital, whereas on the other side of the table, the working class were only classified as those who had only their labour to sell for wages. This included a myriad of people, including factory workers, cab drivers, labourers, and builders. The 3 main implications of social class and inequality that I will be talking about today are access to education, attitudes and values towards education, and the difference between private and public schools. Access to education is a broad phrase that encompasses both cultural differences as well as socio-economic differences. What I mean by this is that depending on the social class of the student, they are more likely to either attend a private school or government-funded schools. For example, those with low SES are more likely to go to a government-funded school as they are cheaper and there are more of them around. This brings me to proximity. In terms of access to education, proximity is one of the most important. Students from low SES could be living in either densely populated communities or living in rural towns with a very small population, therefore few schools to choose from. Their proximity and SES determine what type of school they could attend. However, on a personal level, my family were of high SES and I attended a boarding school that was 4 hours away. There are exceptions to the rule. Attitudes towards education vary between SES and cultural differences. The value of education differs from the same 2 areas. According to McMahon, Educational Psychology, students who are of low SES have more negative attitude toward education. They often attend public school and leave early to help their families. This is one of the contributing factors as to why public schools are constantly being underfunded and that Australian government doesn't value education as much as other aspects. Whilst discussing the last 2 topics, I have briefly touched on the differences between public education and private education. From what I can tell, private schools are more run more as a business with higher fees and more pressure to succeed academically. Public schools are government funded and are in place to level the playing field for all students. They are in a place to allow students to get an education, and the funding of each school differs depending on the attendance and the student population. This brings me to my next topic, which is cultural difference and identity. The themes that will be discussed in this topic are multiculturalism, languages, cultures of Australian education, and the implications of such. Multiculturalism is a word that is used to define Australia's identity. In this context, it relates to how attitudes and values of different cultures perceive education and race-based bullying. As touched on before, the attitudes and values towards education vary on culture to culture. For example, Aboriginal students are more likely to leave school early because of the social constructs and paradigms of their culture and community. One of the main implications of cultural differences on education is that students are subjected to race-based bullying. This is racism and is socially unacceptable as a whole. However, in some rural communities, there is an attitude that racism is acceptable. Language identity is another major factor when referring to education. A lot of the population of Australia is made up of immigrants, therefore there are a lot of different languages spoken at home. As educators, we need to be wary of these differences. We might have students in our class that have come from another country and have language discrepancies. Which leads me to the next point, cultures of Australian education. One of the largest cultures that are present in schools are Muslim Australians. It is important to note that every culture has different values when it comes to education. For example, according to the key text, there are different social and cultural paradigms for male and female Muslim students. One of these is centered around gender and discipline. There are different expectations for either sex. Males are more likely to be rewarded for their risk-taking behavior, whereas females are not. They are punished for speaking out of turn, and for some, they are punished because they do not wish to conform to the social expectations of their culture. Gender in schooling is something that needs to be taken very seriously. This topic is by far the most controversial depending on the audience. According to the key text, Education, Change in Society, gender is a part of our identity. It is defined as the lived experiences of men and women. It is a cultural and social phenomenon. It is the representation of what it is to be a man or a woman. Feminization of teaching refers to how there are more female teachers than male. Therefore, there are a lack of male role models in the classroom. However, there are more men in leadership roles, such as principals, head of departments. Teaching is seen as a maternal career, but it is the stigma around the word maternal that is an issue. It is most commonly correlated to femininity due to social paradigms that women are mothers and men go to work. The major issue that surrounds this topic is sexuality, and that, in turn, bullying. They both go hand in hand in this case, as many of the social conventions suggest that if you are different, you are a target. This topic is very close to my heart, as I had to watch my brothers be attacked and verbally abused by their classmates because they were both gay. The stigma surrounding sexuality is something that is present in every single person's life, whether they are straight or from the LGBT community, have high SES or low SES. The suicide rate is the highest in teens affected by bullying related to sexuality. There are many social paradigms that come into play when talking about the gender gaps in high school completion. According to the textbook Education, Change in Society, in the late 70s, the rate of which male students finished high school was considerably higher than female students. It is suggested that this is due to the social roles of women at the time, as they were marrying young and having children. The roles are changing. More and more women are graduating from high school than their male counterparts. However, this statement depends on the SES of the student. If they come from a low SES background, they are more likely to leave school early and start working to support their families. Another contributing factor that arises when talking about gender and education is teen pregnancy. More and more women are becoming pregnant earlier. This could be due to the sexualized nature of pop culture, and girls are becoming sexualized earlier than ever before. And what does this mean to me as a teacher? All these topics possess a different weight of importance to each individual. All I can say is that in today's ever-evolving society, students and teachers need to be wary of who's in the classroom. There are so many aspects that need to be taken into consideration as a teacher, like disability, gender, socioeconomic status, and the big one, which is culture. On a personal level, the topic of culture is by far the most important. As both of my parents are immigrants from New Zealand, I can understand the changes of learning a whole new social construct and acting accordingly. I have Maori heritage, so I can understand the challenges of fitting in. I do not look Maori, nor do I look white. I am somewhere in the middle. I also grew up on the Central Coast, which is a very sheltered place, and I was bullied because my mum is darker skinned and my dad is white. Due to my personal experiences, I can gain the trust of students and promote a healthy, positive environment. As an art teacher, I have the luxury to be able to give my students creative assignments that are based around their own identity. I'll be able to create a safe environment to allow for my students to explore their own identities.